Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Market Talk. Today we're joined by Ashley Woodhouse, who is the Operations Director at Bird Restaurants, and also Katie Prowse, who is the Senior Insight Manager at Lumina Intelligence. Welcome to you both. Thanks for joining us for this week's edition. A lot of exciting things happening in the market at the moment. So we'll start with you if that's okay, Ashley. First of all, Bird Restaurants. For those that don't necessarily know the company, can you maybe give us some insight to the brand's positioning in the UK market, and maybe some understanding of what the balance is between sort of cell phone stores and franchise stores?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, thank you for having us on. Yeah, I mean, Bird Restaurant was born in 2014 in Shoreditch. We're a chicken and waffle, fried chicken and waffle brand. So we sort of sit in the casual dining aspect of the market. We base a lot of our things on wonderful combinations. So that sweet and savoury. We play on different flavours with that. And yeah, I mean, at the minute we're all cell phone stores, but very much looking to sort of strategize out and look to franchise. We sort of had a strategy in place at the start of the pandemic to franchise out, and we're sort of still on track for that and following the lines to get ourselves in a position to do that.
Right, yeah, you did announce quite a big, ambitious sort of expansion plan during the pandemic, which, as you mentioned there, obviously involved taking the brand into a franchise direction as well. How is that all going at the moment? Have you got many sites in the pipeline?
Yeah, so the company were very ambitious. I joined the company in the very start of the pandemic, and we reviewed everything and where we want to go. And absolutely, we're on track to still launch some stores. We've had to take a few diversions along the way, but I'm sure everyone has, So we've got 3 restaurants in the pipeline to open. One being in October in Hampstead Valley in Kent. But yeah, I mean, the strategy is still on track, but like I say, we diverted, we changed. We tried to stay sort of current and in the market and see what was working. And we very much used it as an opportunity to try new things. We tried dark kitchens. We tried total different areas in the country. At the minute we're based in London. But we went up to Manchester, we went to Nottingham, we went out in different areas around London, and we just wanted to sort of try what was new, what was going to work. And I know there's a lot of talk around dark kitchens, and was that going to be the future? And whether it is or whether it isn't, we wanted to put our toe in the market and see. Firstly, do we fit in these other places and not just London? And also, what does a dark kitchen look like, and what does it offer us? How does it trade? So yeah, we've like I say, we've diverted, but we've taken it as a really good step forward and tried to sort of play with different things and understand what the next sort of 5 years is going to look like for Bird.
Brilliant.
Good stuff. I mean, Ashley, how do you think what you've tried now differs from what you would have done anyway? What was the fork in the road? How would it have been any different had the pandemic not come along?
I think that the company, and especially the leadership above within the company, is very ambitious and always been ambitious. So I think we would have ultimately ventured out into dark kitchens. I think we just took we fast forwarded a lot more than what we would have done. We went at a lot quicker pace. Like I say, when I joined just before the pandemic, we were due to open a couple of full service restaurants, but it wasn't to be at that time. So I would say probably the fork in the road was just the way we changed and the speed at what we went at to sort of get these kitchens open, on our own, and also along with Delivery Editions and stuff like that. So we partnered up with them. And it was eye-opening, to say the least. I mean, we had aggregators anyway, but we traded on all different platforms anyway. But it was eye-opening to really get into that solely.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that later on, but I'm going to bring Katie into the conversation now. So one of the big changes that a lot of operators have made across this pandemic period is that they've kind of generally reduced the size of their menus. So, I mean, what does that picture look like at the moment from Lumina's point of view?
Yeah, I think it's great to be here as well. I think initially it was sort of because of the operational challenges. Lots of operators were sort of having to deal with smaller areas in kitchens, lots of staff being off sick. And I think smaller menus at that point sort of allowed them to still deliver that really high quality, high consistency offer, just with a smaller sort of menu size. But what we've actually found since operators have launched their spring summer 2021 menus is that although that they've added a few more sort of dishes back to those menus, they still remain notably smaller than they were pre-pandemic. And I think, as Ashley spoke about, the pandemic sort of accelerated their movements to like what they were going to do before. We've actually seen in the wider market that the pandemic has like accelerated a lot of pre-existing trends. So delivery obviously is one. But another one of those trends is operators sort of being more specialised and having a more specialised range of offers on their menu. I think it shows that sort of brands that are being able to diversify and sort of have that really specialised, really focused offering are popular with consumers. Consumers know what to expect when they go to those sorts of restaurants. And it's this sort of less trying to be everything for everybody and just trying to sort of do what you do really well to the best that you could possibly do it. And that's what we're seeing. So yeah, a lot of operators still have got smaller menus, and I personally think that is going to be the case going forward. I think you've got to be very clever with what you add to your menus. And yeah, at the moment we are seeing still reduced menus to about 15-20% smaller than they were pre-pandemic. And I think there's a sort of a lot of reasons behind that.
One of the trends in your latest research, Katie, showed that although the menus are smaller, as you mentioned there, that the number of items on the spring-summer menus have increased from autumn-winter last year. What sort of looking ahead to autumn-winter this year, 2021? What sort of feel do you get for whether they're going to increase, decrease, or stay the same?
Yeah, I personally think that they'll probably stay around the same level. One thing that's really interesting is you'd think that operators only really need to continue to add to menus if they're putting off consumers from not having a big enough menu. But actually, our eating and drinking out panel, which is sort of a consumer questionnaire to around 5,000 consumers a month, actually shows that consumers don't think that operators have any less of a wide menu choice. So satisfaction scores in that area have actually remained really positive. And actually menu inflation was really, really high in autumn winter 2020 as well. Obviously quite obvious why that would be. But what's really interesting is that consumers also didn't think that the value for money satisfactions had gone down either. So it's clear that operators can not get away with, but the cost increases that they're having and the smaller menus aren't actually putting off consumers. And it's just really about offering consumers that sort of out of home experience that they can't replicate as easy indoors, and just making it really worth their while to go out and to have that experience. And that, I think, was what will be the focus come sort of the Christmas period this year. Right,
yeah, and Ashley, bringing you back into the conversation, how does that fit with how you manage the menu situation at Bird? Is your menu smaller and more streamlined than the one that you had in place before the pandemic?
I'd say, listen, we've had a lot of fun with the menus. We've had a lot of fun with the menus. We played with them, and we tried to use everything as an opportunity. If I'm honest with you, the very first lockdown, we were probably in our area one of the restaurants that stayed open for takeaway and delivery. So we didn't do too much at that point. But then sort of coming out the back of the first lockdown, we had we changed the menu completely. We tried new sauces, we tried some new vegan options. So probably a little bit against the grain. We went bigger and tried to do a little bit more than what we usually do. And again, we did it for a learning perspective. Coming back now into the most recent menu launch, we've refined again. So absolutely along the lines of what Katie said, we've refined. We've stuck to doing what we know we can do right. But we wanted to use it again as an opportunity to try and work out what the next 3 or 4 years is going to look like for Bird, and do we need to branch out, and do we need to be a little bit different, or do we stick to doing what we do and saying this is what we do, and we're going to try and do it better than most? So yeah, absolutely, we fit pretty much in line with what Katie's saying.
Ashley, there's been a lot of headlines recently in terms of supply chain challenges. Certain other competitor brands have run out of chicken and that kind of thing. So has that been influencing what Bird offers on their menus?
In all honesty, we've been extremely lucky. We haven't run out of chicken yet, touch wood. So no, we haven't faced that issue. We have faced the standard issues like a lot of people, how long it comes in and sort of how quickly you can get it. We had to change our delivery days and try and get it more often, more regularly, or even change suppliers or have 2 or 3 backup suppliers, sort of in the midst. But our suppliers have been fantastic and they've really looked after us. And yeah, we haven't faced any of those challenges yet. But again, we tried to play with the sizes of sort of the portioning we get and try and get the tolerance really small. So, we didn't really want to inflate menu prices. So what we've tried to do is refine everything to make sure the guests always get the same sort of size chicken burger or chicken breast, or if it's inner tenders, they get the same size pieces. So it's always they're getting value for money. And that's what we really wanted to do is try and refine all our offering, which also then sits us in a really good place to move forward when we want to franchise.
Good stuff. Katie, coming back to you, as say we've been discussing smaller menus. So is there any sector of the market at the moment that's not actually gone down that road, that has tried something different?
So from what we track in Menu Tracker, the smaller menus is across the board. So it's something that we're seeing in the pub and bar market. We're seeing across chain restaurants and also traditional and contemporary fast food as well. But what's interesting is players sort of more contemporary fast food, a lot of their offers, a lot of their core offers, if we think about the sort of Mexican burrito guys and those sorts of offerings, they are they're customizable. So actually you could have one sort of dish on the menu, but consumers can order it however they like, and that could sort of amalgamate into 10 different versions of one dish. And customization is a trend that we've seen come through really strongly in the last few menu seasons, because I think it allows operators to maintain that element of choice for consumers, and it aligns with that consumer trend for like a more personalized experience. But it does so without actually making it life a lot more difficult for the kitchen staff. What you were saying, Ashley, where you've sort of experimented with different kinds of sauces and different kinds of offerings, but sort of trying to nail the portion sizes, I think that's going to be something that is an important factor going forwards as well. It already has been, but I think one thing that the pandemic really brought to sort of the reality is how much of an issue food waste is. And I think lots of operators are now taking the time to evaluate their menus and spot where the sort of problem areas are with things that constantly get wasted, and managing those things like portion control, maybe side dishes that aren't as popular and tend to get wasted a lot more. That's another area where operators can really manage their costs, and that's going to be something that I think we see going forward a lot more as well.
It felt like in the first lockdown that operators reduced their menus because it really made sense from an operational point of view, and maybe didn't have as many people sort of working for them while it was all going on, and therefore it still allowed them to maintain a business, particularly on the delivery side. Obviously, since then now there are so many more factors at play, because as Ashley discussed just then, there have been ingredient shortages, plus there have been all sorts of price hikes on certain ingredients as well. Presumably, Katie, this is sort of all having an impact on kind of the future direction of menus and menu developments as well.
Yeah, so I think we will see more streamlined menus going forwards. There was a sort of time maybe 5-6 years ago where a lot of the core like pub restaurant brands, their menus just got absolutely enormous. We're talking about sort of 70 to 80 dishes. And I think that's that sort of thing where they are trying to give an option to absolutely everybody, and they're trying to do too much almost. What we've found in some of our more advanced menu analysis is actually the smaller menus and the menus with sort of less wording on them, the more simplified menus, actually come with higher price points. And I think it gives consumers the confidence in the brand, in what they're ordering, that it is going to be sort of high quality. So I think operators will manage their menus in future as well. If we think about the amount of menus now that consumers access digitally, so a lot of operators have kept that sort of digital side to ordering in place despite the restrictions being eased. I think it means that certainly for operators that try and have seasonal dishes and change their menus quite frequently, it reduces the costs. There's no need to have to do a full reprint. And I think that's something that's going to definitely continue on menus. If consumers can sort of flick through a menu on their phone, we did some consumer research really recently, and actually 55% of consumers said that they think they dwell more across a menu and they spend more time browsing it when it is digital. And I think that's where operators can use that sort of opportunity to encourage upsell, encourage that customization element that brings with it a higher price point as well.
Sure, interesting. Okay. Clearly, to deliver a consistent menu, you need the right kitchen operation. Ashley, can you give us some insight into what Bird's kitchen model is? Do you have a fairly rigid template that you stick to?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I can't help but the pandemic has been great to refine this, because we've opened quite a few different kitchens, and especially, I'm sure you guys know that when you open a dark kitchen, you're in a very tight space. It's helped us to refine the model. So yeah, we have a rigid model. The cook line doesn't really change. But from an operations point of view, with probably recruitment challenges, we've tried to change the way we recruit in the back of house, and not necessarily look for chefs now, look for personality and back of house team members, as we would call them, and try and cross train them front and back of house. So we've tried to reduce the skill set in the kitchen, and make it so you don't have to be specialized. We can bring someone on board and we can train them, we can cross train them front and back of house. And I think for speed of service, it really works quite well.
Yeah.
Ashley, you mentioned speed of service there, so say that aspect and consistency of the offer must be quite important. So how much time do you spend evaluating the equipment and the processes that you use back of house?
Yeah, for sure. Again, there's been a lot of focus on that, because I think the world and the sort of environment we've been in has driven us to make sure that we are on top of those things. We spend a fair bit of time always looking at developing the menu and always looking at the processes, and sort of the SOPs and how the guys work in the kitchen. And that sort of ties back into the menu as well. And for instance, we had a product of chicken drumsticks, but we realized how long they actually take to cook compared to the rest of our chicken cuts. It was worth taking it off, because we want to make sure that fresh food is going out fresh. Also with delivery, we know that it can be sat in the sort of takeaway boxes for 30 minutes during transit. So we don't want to then, we used to hot hold quite a lot, but we've sort of gone back to, okay, how much can we cook to order? So then what does that determine on our menu? So again, we've tried to refine those processes and make it work for the environment that we're in now, whilst also trying to deliver quality all the time.
Stuff. Well, that sounds pretty positive. Fingers crossed. But coming back to Katie, so just touching back on the small menu issue. I mean, it's beneficial for operators in terms of, say, time saving, cost management, simplicity. So looking forwards, do you think that most operators are keen to carry on that way, that's going to happen continuously over the next few years, or is there this kind of reticence to do that because they fear that they'll be driving customers away?
Yeah, I think, as I said before, I think this was a pre-pandemic sort of trend that got accelerated in the last couple of years. If we look at some of the bigger chain restaurants, sort of your Prezzo, your Ask Italian, they actually saw their menus be quite heavily streamlined across sort of 2018, 2019, when there was lots of pressures around CVAs and closures, and the chain restaurant sector is something that's transitioned hugely in the last 3 years. So I think in those segments already consumers are used to sort of a more specialised, a more refined menu offer. And I think that there has been an element of consumers not really being that fussed, as long as they've got enough sort of vegetarian, vegan options. The gluten-free side of it is becoming really important as well. I think as long as there's enough options for each different kind of dietary requirement, then consumers really, I think they expect a more specialised offer now, and they expect a higher level of quality, a higher level of experience. And if you want a pizza, you'd go to a restaurant that specialises in pizzas. If you wanted some sort of chicken, you'd go to like maybe Bird, a restaurant that specialises in that sort of fried chicken area. So I think a lot of consumers now make the decision of where they're going based on the specific food that they want to eat. And that's where we're seeing the growth come from in that sort of chain restaurant space. We've got steak restaurants that just specialise in steak. We've got chicken restaurants that specialise in chicken. And I think that's where the market is headed. Certainly for like pub restaurants, there is a level of expectation among consumers that they'll be able to get sort of their pub classics, and now they want sort of healthier and lighter options as well. I think it's about managing the message and managing the menu so that you can maintain those sorts of consumer favourites, and you can also introduce sort of newer, maybe more on-trend offerings, but not to a level where the kitchen just becomes completely overwhelmed. And maybe there's an element to it where they need to review the menus more, not more efficiently, but more often, and make quicker changes when something isn't selling well or something's being wasted quite a bit. So yeah, I think overall smaller menus are here to stay, and I don't think that that's a bad thing at all.
No, definitely not. And it seems like the pace of change is probably, going to be quicker moving forward now. And operators are going to have to react to what's going on in the market when it comes to how they develop those menus and roll those out. We're just reaching time now, unfortunately, but thank you both for joining us for today's episode. Really fascinating, Katie, to get some insight into where menu trends are going, and also actually to understand how your business has developed during the pandemic, and some of the exciting things that are happening on that front. So thank you to you both, and for everybody listening and watching. We'll be back again soon with another episode of Market Talk. Thank you. Goodbye.